So today we've come to Brighton to meet Carly Barton, who's running the programme Cancard, which aims to reduce the criminalisation and prosecution of medicinal cannabis users. Thanks for having us in, Carly.
You're welcome, love.
So tell us, nice broad question, how did you get into this? How have you ended up being behind something like Cancard?
So I guess I'm a patient first and foremost. So I had a stroke in my 20s that left me in a bit of a bad way with the damage to my brain. That meant that I was in just constant pain. Neuropathic pain signals were just kicking off all over my body. So like if I hit you with a hammer, you'd only feel it. Well, I'm not going to, but if I hit you with a hammer, you'd only feel it because your brain sends the signal to wherever I've hit you, and it sends the pain signal back, whereas my pain signals were misfiring all day, every day. So I was just constantly in like a beaten up zone.
And what did you have for that then? Like what were you prescribed?
Yeah, so everything really. I mean, I've tried every pain medicine going, barbiturates, benzodiazepines. I was on over 20 pills a day. I was on morphine and fentanyl, which is 50 times stronger than street heroin. And I was just pumping myself full of these chemicals. And, you know, it wasn't, I was still in agony. I was still screaming the house down at night. My neighbour was still complaining that he could hear me screaming at night. And I got to the point where I was Googling end of life clinics because I needed to know that I had an out, because I couldn't really think of how I could go another day in that amount of pain and in that amount of misery, knowing that, well, the doctors were telling me that there isn't another option. One thing that I'd really put off was cannabis. My mates were like, Carly, come on. And I was kind of like, I kind of just had this idea about it. You know, I was in a dark place and I thought, I don't want anything else to affect my mental health. I've not smoked since I was much younger. You know, I didn't see it as a medicine. And then one night I had an almighty like fuck it moment, and I went downstairs and smoked a joint because my friend had left some in the cupboard that sat there for like 12 months. Then I realised that I couldn't feel pain. And that was the moment where, you know, it was the first moment in 6 years that I'd ever come anything close to a pain-free state. And that was just like a massive moment for me. And I realised that actually we don't, you know, the things that we think about this plant, you know, it's really, really misunderstood, and is actually a really, really powerful medicine that can really help people, particularly with pain. There's, you know, 1.4 million people in the UK who are consuming cannabis medicinally. 1.1 of those legally qualify for a private prescription, can't afford a prescription. So we're currently criminalising over 1 million people for being unwell, and that's something that I wanted to change. So essentially, Cancard's a medical ID that if you qualify legally for a private prescription, so you have a condition which is being prescribed for privately, and you use cannabis medicinally, you can apply for a card. It's a photo ID card that proves that you are eligible for a legal private prescription, whether you can afford it or not. So that if you are caught in the street with your inhaler, or, you know, any police bother you with regards to possession, simple possession, you can show the card. The police will be briefed nationally on the scheme, and they will know how to verify the card, and they will be given national guidance to say to use their discretion in that case and to leave the patient in charge of their medicine. You know, that's been fully endorsed by the police, and it's been backed by, you know, the highest ranking police in the country. We've got a lot of support ready, but we've got a lot of graft that's happening in the background, and a lot of that has to do with ensuring that things like the patient data is GDPR compliant, that we are completely transparent in any data that we're keeping on patients, which is going to be minimal. But we want to ensure that, you know, the database sits with us and isn't accessible by police or third parties. We have employed a data company who look after the NHS data and pharmaceutical data and things like that. So they're really sensitive company who handle all of the, you know, the health data that we've got in the UK. They're the best of the best. But we're also working with the police to try and work on the comms situation so that we know for sure that every police officer in the UK will have this briefing and will understand how to use the Cancard and what to do if there's an issue on the street.
It sounds like a great initiative. From someone who's been working in the policy space for years, I'm really excited about it. But you did promise me chips. Kevin looks pretty hungry, so
come on,
let's get some food.
Kevin.
I guess what I'd be really interested in knowing a bit more about after our chat earlier is what has the response been like from the community? Because it's a community that you've been involved in for a number of years, it's continued to grow and evolve. So how have they responded to the Cancard initiative?
I think generally there's a lot of relief and a lot of celebration when it was announced. And I think that they've earned that. I think years and years and years of living in fear and living with not much in the way of hope of change. And also just living their life, walking around and fearing a tap on the shoulder just for taking a medicine that helps them keep them well. I think they deserved a break, and I think everyone's seen it as something that will help. So, we had over 10,000 sign-ups in the first few days.
It's great to see a positive response. It's great to see so many people sign up. Sounds like a really good start. So just kind of looking a bit beyond where we're at the moment, what's kind of the vision and the future look like for Cancard? Where are you wanting to take this as an initiative?
Well, I think Cancard sort of addresses the initial question, which is the really basic shit, which is, do these patients who are unwell deserve to be criminalised? And Cancard addresses that and answers that question. The next question, I think, is how can we make sure that these patients are accessing the medicine that's right for them in a safe way? And so I think the next sensible step is to look at access. So to look at grow your own schemes, to be folding that in after the legal review's taken place, to be looking to co-op grows and to be looking to spaces and opportunities where we can ensure that patients who need this medicine can access safe and affordable routes to that medicine. And I think it's all down to the community all pulling together that we've got this fight in the first place.
And through yours and your battle, credit where credit's due as well. I always find your experience and the effort you've put in to be inspirational, and it's great to see you at the front of such a strong initiative. Really appreciate taking the time out chatting to us, and all the best with it.
Thanks, mate.
So I always find Carly's story so inspirational, and for me it really highlights why we need to urgently reform our cannabis laws. People who have such a life-changing experience from using cannabis should not be persecuted, should not be criminalised, they shouldn't be arrested by the police for using what is a life-changing medicine. And I think the scheme has got legs. It sounds brilliant, and I'm really pleased the community have supported it. I guess the questions I've got sit in the lands of the legality of this scheme. Where does it sit within the framework of the current law? And fundamentally, how well supported is it going to be by the police? So I think the best thing to do now is to go back to London, speak to some lawyers, and before we do that, let's get some ice cream.
Most that are viewing this, and Carly will know, that medicinal cannabis is now legalised in the UK. The problem is the access. Now, why that is the case, there's a variety of different reasons: educational, having the General Medical Council on board, NICE, and so on and so forth. The problem is, how do we get access? Well, if you're not one of the three that are getting it prescribed, you can go to private prescription. But unfortunately, that's not available to everybody in the sense of funding that. So what's left for them is to unfortunately buy cannabis from sources that they shouldn't buy cannabis, whether that's from the streets or buying it from other jurisdictions outside of the UK and bringing those in. That runs the risk, going back to the Misuse of Drugs Act, that you're now controlling something that you shouldn't have in your possession, and that obviously comes with penalties. If the police are aware of Cancard and someone is caught holding having cannabis on them, and they've got a Cancard, the police officer still has a duty, obviously, to ascertain whether or not that person is justifiably holding cannabis for the purposes of medicinal use.
But one thing I guess that's really important to consider is the vulnerability of a lot of patient groups. And I know from my background in treatment that a lot of people that use drugs, not just cannabis, but drugs in general, for medicinal purposes, i.e. physical, emotional pain, they don't always have the resources to maybe get the level of legal help that they require, or even just articulate the complexities of their situation.
It's also tying up a administrative process that allows that check and balance to take place. And obviously there's technologies, we're talking about apps, readers, and so on and so forth, will only help benefit. But obviously the police are backing this, or the Commission's backing this at the moment, because they can see that their time is being spent dealing with individuals that will never be prosecuted down the line, potentially, if they've shown that the use of their cannabis, the limited amount of cannabis that they've held, is used for medicinal purposes.
So that was great to speak to Ricardo at Mackerel Solicitors today. I think that gives us a really good overview of how this card sits within the current legal framework. I guess the next step is to go to speak to someone with expertise in the police, either an ex or a current police officer, who can talk a little bit more about how the card might be adopted and used by the current police force. We're in Camden, a place that you have a background with when it comes to policing. So can you give us a little bit of just a little bit of insight into what your involvement was with the police and maybe particularly around cannabis?
So I worked with the Metropolitan Police, mainly based out of Kentish Town, Camden. I was here for about 2 years, and I was here as MSC, so Metropolitan Special Constabulary. But my experience of policing got a bit interesting in the sense that one day I had a phone call as to whether I'd like to go and be in the audience of BBC Question Time, and the topic of knife crime came up whilst we were there. I put my hand up, and Fiona Bruce basically told me, well, as a police officer, what would you do? And one of the first things that left my lips was basically I would legalise cannabis, and I'd do it tomorrow. It's one of the first things that I would do if I was looking to help tackle violent crime on our streets.
Is there a lot of variation in how police officers deal with cannabis?
Yes, so I can only talk from my experience of within the Metropolitan Police, and I think it's well documented that you can cross the border from the Metropolitan Police to Essex Police, and within 50 metres find that officers will treat you very different ways depending on how their force sees fit to deal with cannabis. So there's that national discrepancy, but then there's this more localised discrepancy. So in the case of London is split into kind of various areas of command. So you can North area, East area, who again subsequently have their own borough commanders, who again subsequently will take their own view as to how they should deal with cannabis. So it's really fragmented. There's no national. This is how we deal with it. It varies
local. Area to area. It sounds like something like Cancard could kind of at least start a positive conversation with a police officer in what might be a difficult interaction, and maybe kind of, I guess, help increase awareness amongst the police.
You've got to remember that you're putting the police officer in as awkward a situation as you are putting yourself in by forcing the issue, because like you say, it is still illegal, despite despite this scheme being backed and recognised by kind of medical bodies and police federations. So it's a very grey area. So the best decision is going to be the decision of the sergeant on duty, because ultimately they're the authority. So get them to speak to the sergeant and clarify.
Joe, cheers so much for chatting to us today. I think that gives us a really good idea of, it gives us some really good advice for people that get a card, and I think it gives a really good idea of how that card will fit into the current police systems. And I like the fact we've explored some nuance around how it's dealt with at the moment, and I guess reinforces the calls that you made for we need to rethink our cannabis laws. There's more work to be done, so really appreciate you chatting with me today.
No worries. No, to be fair, it's great that there's actually something being done around this, and that there's an attempt being made to kind of give people and police officers clarity as to the status, as to why people are carrying cannabis. So all around that, it's a great thing.
Definitely. Should we get mobile? I'm so cold. We need to get moving. So that is the Cancard scheme. I think it provides an innovative and useful tool for people who are using medical cannabis, and I sincerely hope it goes some way to reduce the vast amount of harm caused by our current cannabis laws. Thanks for watching the show. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe for more drug reform content.